Hey, it's Ramsey Dewey over here in Shanghai, China. Welcome to another edition of Q&A with the Coach. Today we have a question from Flying Fat Cat, who says, I need a video of what, if you make a martial arts tournament, what the rules will be, like a conceptual, figurative martial art. Good videos and point of view. All right, Flying Fat Cat, thank you for your question. Oh, I love that question. What would I do? Well, I'll tell you what. It would be very similar to the original UFC, no rules, no gloves, maybe a time limit. They didn't have time limits originally. Maybe I would do like 1 30-minute round. That might sound like a long time, but bear with me. And instead of no weight classes, I would say weight classes and then an open weight division. Ooh, that open weight division would answer so many questions that I have about super heavyweights. For those of you who don't know, the heavyweight division tops off at 265 pounds. If you weigh over that, can't compete. So you got to cut down, if you're a super heavyweight, to the heavyweight threshold. So I would love for there to be a super heavyweight, no upper weight limit, weight class to answer those questions. What happens when the giants fight? Because I think that would be cool, especially in this day and age, where there are so many people who actually do know how to fight. As Joe Rogan once unintentionally, hilariously said, there are more people alive today who can kick people in the face than ever before in the Earth's history. And the seriousness with which he said those words just makes me crack up every time I think about it. True facts, my friends. There are more people alive on the earth today who can kick people in the face than ever before in the Earth's history. So, not just that, but there are a lot more complete fighters today who know how to box, and they know how to wrestle, and they know Muay Thai, and they know Judo and Jiu-Jitsu, and submission grappling, and catch wrestling, and all this stuff, and they're well-rounded fighters in all ranges of hand-to-hand combat. And I would love to see those skill sets under the original UFC rules. And you might be thinking, well, we already had the original UFC, we don't need that. Except we do, because when the original UFC happened, nobody knew how to fight. It's true, man. Nobody knew how to fight. I mean, and even Royce Gracie, the champion who dazzled us all with jiu-jitsu for the first time, for most of us who saw that. Watch that today. Watch that today. If you're a grappler, if you're a wrestler, if you know how to wrestle, watch Royce's takedowns today, and you'll be like, oh, really? Watch his setups for those takedowns. If you know what you're doing in a cage fight, by today's standards, watch that, and ooh, that's some cringeworthy stuff. Royce was a third-degree black belt back then during UFC 1, and I'm not talking about his actual jiu-jitsu here. I mean, we could turn this into a conversation about, how good jiu-jitsu was back then compared to jiu-jitsu today. And I've heard some people say some things, even mean and disrespectful things about those old school jiu-jitsu players. And they'd be like, oh, well, a third-degree black belt back then was like a purple belt today. But they're not the same thing. I mean, purple belts today, for the most part, what are they doing? They're competing in IBJJF tournaments, where if somebody reaps your knee by putting their heel 2 centimeters too far across the line of the hip, they get disqualified, versus, Royce Gracie in a cage fight where he had giant men trying to punch his head off. Granted, they didn't know jiu-jitsu, but, it's not the same thing. Or, Helio Gracie doing Vale Tudo fights in Brazil, again, under very different conditions, very different rules, different skill sets, man. So again, what the Gracie's brought to mixed martial arts in the early days of the UFC. It was a radically different skill set than modern sport jiu-jitsu. So if you want to have that discussion, go ahead. But, yeah, man, if we put today's fighters, MMA fighters, not IBJJF purple belts, but MMA fighters, skilled in all ranges of combat, who really know how to play the game, who really know how to fight, and put them in those rules today, in a 16-man... Actually, I don't know if I would keep the elimination tournament format. I like it. It was exciting. It was entertaining. It was fun to see, okay, this one guy has to go through all these fights in a row, all on the same day, but it's incredibly taxing on the fighters. And often what happens in a multiple-man tournament like that is somebody gets injured, and then an alternate has to step in. And in the case of, was it Kirk or Steve Jenham? I always mess up that guy's first name. He was a ninja in UFC 3. Jenham, I'm going to call him Steve. Sounds about right. Somebody correct me in the comments down below. I'm not going to look it up. I don't have internet access in this room. So Steve Jenham, he steps in as the alternate because Royce Gracie and Ken Shamrock, the finalists in UFC 3, both got injured and they couldn't continue. And so they got the runner-up, a karate guy who had been badly beaten and bruised in his previous fights, and Steve Jenham, the ninja, coming in fresh, sneaking into the UFC, stealing away the belt with ninja stealth exactly the way a ninja would. And the fans were a little bit robbed. They were like, oh, okay, he didn't put on a bad performance, not by any stretch of the imagination, but it was anticlimactic. We were all hoping that, Royce Gracie and Ken Shamrock would have this epic rematch, and we were all wanting that. We wanted it. And it didn't happen, and we got kind of a discount version of the final match with some dudes we'd never heard of. So, yeah, that was that. That was UFC 3. So, I still like the idea of tournaments, and I like that a lot more than what the UFC actually does, where it's very vague. Like, how do you qualify for a championship fight? Aside from being a marketable enough fighter who has won enough fights to get people talking about you and get the promoters thinking, okay, this seems like a good idea, this will make us some money. And a tournament format is not that. But it's pretty honest and straightforward, and it's easy to keep track of, and I like it. I like it. In spite of the fact that it's not the best way to sell tickets and put butts in the seats necessarily. I say necessarily because there are a lot of other sports that use a tournament format. I mean, like March Madness, college basketball. I don't really follow basketball, but I know enough about it that some people get really, really excited about those tournament brackets of college basketball in America, and oh man, it becomes their life for a while. And I know some people have tried to do a similar thing, get tournament brackets and teams for martial arts. I think Chuck Norris tried to do that for a while with, what did he call it? Something like the World Combat League, something like that. They had like this rounded sort of padded pit instead of a boxing ring to do these modified rules kickboxing matches in. He was trying to make this exciting team sport out of kickboxing. And it didn't really take off. I mean, I appreciated the effort. There were some good fights there, but yeah. Didn't get the kind of traction he was hoping for. But this isn't a question of what rule set would be the most profitable, just what kind of rule set does Ramsey Dewey want to see? And yeah, that's it. So I would probably keep the tournament format, but have the fights on different days. So the champion of this particular bracket, okay, he wins the fight, he's going to move on to the next one, okay, in a couple of weeks after he's healed up, right? That seems fair to me. That seems like it would be a more exciting fight. Hopefully less chances of injury, but then again, you might have people doing some stupid stuff in those 2 or 3 or 4 or 10 weeks or however long it is in between fights, getting injured. I mean, how many times have we seen that in the UFC? We were hoping for a spectacular show. I mean, the one time I bought tickets to watch a live UFC event, the fighter that I was hoping to see, who was headlining that event, got cut from the roster. And I was like, why? Oh, that sucks. Khabib, man, he's been dealing with this. When was that? About a year or so ago. He was dealing with some injuries or getting sick or whatever, so he couldn't follow through with these fights, and people were like, oh, but why? I wanted to see him fight. He's so good, and now he can't, and I'm angry, and I'm going to say angry things on the internet about it. Yeah. So, I like the tournament bracket. I would keep it. You know what? Let's be adventurous. Let's be crazy. Let's risk the Steve Jenham ninjas of the world taking the belts and just say, yeah, let's do it all on the same day. Ooh, but Ramsey, that's not fair. We don't do these things because they're fair. We do them because they're awesome. Cage fighting does not exist because of fairness. It exists because it's awesome. Anyway, love the question, love the idea. Hope you appreciated my answer. Thank you for watching. Now get out there and train.